Are you trying to decide on whether to become a psychiatrist or psychologist in 2021? Well, in this video, we have 5 different factors for you to consider when comparing both of these occupations. Coming up. Hey everyone, Stephen Hack here with Career Watch, where we help you with your career search. If you've been enjoying the video, hit that thumbs up to support the channel. If you're interested in becoming a psychologist or psychiatrist, join the conversation below, especially if you already are a psychiatrist or psychologist. Let us know your input. The first thing to understand is psychiatrists are doctors, whereas psychologists are not. Psychiatrists actually have to go to medical school and do a residency before they can begin work. Becoming a psychologist, on the other hand, is a little bit more varied. Some psychologist positions actually do require a doctoral program, and others just require a master's degree. So factor number 1, psychiatrists vastly out-earn psychologists and have higher wage growth. In 2019, the government recorded the average base salary of a psychiatrist at $220,430. The national average for psychologists, on the other hand, was $87,450. Both occupations tend to earn more than marriage and family therapists and social workers. Psychiatrists also tend to earn more than family medicine physicians. Another thing to consider is the wage growth for psychiatrists has been significantly more than psychologists. In 1999, the average base salary for a psychologist was around $50,000. Meanwhile, the average base salary for a psychiatrist in 1999 was $103,660. By 2019, the average base salary for psychiatrists more than doubled to $220,430. Meanwhile, psychologist wages rose to $87,450. This gives us an average yearly wage growth for psychiatrists of around $5,600 per year and about $1,800 for psychologists. If we were to take this average yearly wage growth and plot it into the future, in 2021, the average base salary for a psychiatrist would rise to around $232,000 per year and about $91,000 for a psychologist. And by 2029, the average base salary of a psychiatrist would rise to a staggering $276,000 per year and about $105,000 for psychologists. So the gap in earnings between psychologists and psychiatrists seems to be growing more and more as time goes on. And if you've seen any of my other physician and surgeon videos, psychiatrists aren't even in the top 10 for highest paid doctors and surgeons. Factor number 2, psychiatrists are more in demand. There's actually more psychologists than psychiatrists. In 2019, there was 113,270 employed psychologists across the country, whereas there was 25,530 employed psychiatrists. So the workforce for psychologists is larger. There's actually even more post-secondary psychology teachers than there are practicing employed psychiatrists. Both occupations have grown over time. In 1999, there was about 92,460 employed psychologists and about 18,000 employed psychiatrists. The number of employed in both occupations has risen quite a bit over the past 2 decades. But to get at whether there's a shortage of psychologists and psychiatrists, we actually have to look at the number of job postings across the country. And typically we compare the number of job postings against the number of employed. To do this, I use Indeed.com. Indeed pulls in job postings from many different sources, and then it kind of gives us an idea of how many job postings there are across the country. I found different keywords for psychiatrists and psychologists, and I only searched for the titles. So for example, if you just make a general search in Indeed and you search for psychologist, if psychologist actually shows up in the description of the job posting, it'll show up in the search results. Whereas if you just search for the search term in the title, it gets rid of some of the bad data. There's actually quite a few psychologist job titles. I don't know if I got all of them, but in total for these 5 different keywords, I found that there was about 8,400 job postings for this occupation. Meanwhile, I found there was about 2,849 job postings with psychiatrist in the title of the job posting. So now that we have the number of job postings, we can compare it to the number of employed or compare it to the workforce. This is what that looks like, and this kind of shows that there's more of a shortage of psychiatrists than psychologists during the filming of this video. There's almost 3,000 job postings against a workforce of about 25,000 people for psychiatrists, which gives us a 1-to-8 ratio. Whereas for psychologists, there was around 8,400 job postings against a workforce of about 113,000 people, which comes out to a 1-to-13 ratio. So based off this, there's more of a shortage of psychiatrists than psychologists. And as I shared in my psychiatry video, there's a lot of things contributing to the psychiatrist shortage. Many psychiatrists are older and they're going to be retiring soon, which is going to contribute to the psychiatry shortage. And only so many people are admitted to medical school every year. So factor number 2, there's more of a shortage of psychiatrists than psychologists. Factor number 3, psychiatrists and psychologists have very similar RIASEC codes, also known as Holland codes. When someone does a RIASEC assessment, the assessment tries to measure their interests across 6 different domains. According to the Occupational Information Network, which is a branch of the Department of Labor, psychiatrists and psychologists have the same 3 main Holland codes. They would both be ISAs, which stands for investigative, social, and artistic, although their scores are a little bit different in each of those 3 domains. Psychiatrists tend to score a little bit higher in the investigative theme, which means maybe they're a little bit more curious, whereas psychologists tend to score a little higher in the social and artistic theme, so maybe they're a little bit more helpful and creative, or more interested in those 2 different things. These Holland codes only represent interests, so really it doesn't measure skills, it doesn't measure abilities. These are just interests of people that take the RIASEC assessment. And we can also compare the personalities of psychiatrists and psychologists, and that is factor number 4. Psychologists and psychiatrists have very similar personality types, specifically Myers-Briggs personality types. The most likely Myers-Briggs personality type to become a psychologist was the INFJ, which is also known as the advocate, whereas for psychiatrist, it was the architect, the INTJ. But both of them have kind of the same top 5 Myers-Briggs types. These include the ENTJ, the commander, the debater, ENTP, and the giver, ENFJ. And finally, we get to factor number 5. The barrier to become a psychiatrist is more extreme than the barrier to become a psychologist. Like I said before, med schools only accept a certain number of people. Many people apply to med school every year, and less than half are admitted. Also, it requires more debt to become a psychiatrist. According to the Association of American Medical Colleges, the average medical school debt for students who graduated in 2019 was $201,490. And many of these medical school graduates go on to do residencies where they make kind of a fraction of what they'll make later on when they're full-fledged doctors. Meanwhile, the average student loan debt burden for a psychologist tends to be lower, but it really depends on whether you're getting a doctoral degree, a master's degree. It could be tens of thousands of dollars, but in some cases for doctoral programs, it could potentially be hundreds of thousands of dollars as well. So those are 5 different factors for you to consider when trying to choose between becoming a psychologist or becoming a psychiatrist. Both of these are great occupations for people that want to help other people. Are you trying to become a psychologist or a psychiatrist in 2021? Let us know down in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.